Okay, reloading for competitive shooting. What we've done in the past was teaching you the basics and the theory of how to reload. And that was on a single stage press where we showed you rifle and pistol and the different steps you have to go through for both styles of cartridges. Pistol being a straight wall case and rifle being what they call a bottleneck case. You can be extremely precise and make some really good ammo on a single stage press. And I still use a single stage today on making load testing in small batches. When it's time to load for a match though, and I have a known good load for my rifle or pistol, that's when I move towards my progressive loader. And that's when I am able to be a lot more time efficient and be able to make a decent amount of ammo in a shorter period of time. So I'm not up till 2 a.m. making ammo like I have in the past. What we're going to go over is my Dillon loaders. I'm starting with my Dillon 550, and then I'm going to move up to my Dillon 1100. The reason why I'm doing that is because the 1100 is a decent size investment, and I didn't start off that way because I couldn't financially bite off that much all at once. So I'm going to show two different styles, and they're pretty much on the polar opposites of Dillon's progressive spectrum, if you will. The 550 is a very, very capable loader. If you're trying to make a few hundred rounds here and there, and you aren't trying to have onboard swaging for crimped military style brass, the 550 works great. Moving forward in the next series, I'll go over the 1100, and I'll explain more in depth why I used the 1100 and why I even bumped up to it. So that's what this series is going to be about. So sit back, enjoy, and let's get to it. I moved up from a single stage press up to a Dillon progressive press. Now I have two, but I'm going to start with the 550, which is the press that I bought first, and then I'll move to the 1100, which I bought after that. The 550 is unique to Dillon for its progressive presses because it's a 4-stage station press, but it's more unique because of how it articulates. You manually rotate the stations, and I'll show you close up how all this works, but that's the more unique one of their lineup because on all their other ones, every time you move the handle, it automatically turns the stations for you, whereas this one, you have a little more control over it. If you're testing something and you're doing a load workup, it doesn't automatically change the station on you, so it is helpful in that aspect. What is the Dillon 550? This is their entry-level progressive press. So this is going to be the most affordable press that they make that's for rifle and pistol. How the 550 works is you have a tool head assembly that has 4 stations in it, and that slides in on the top. When you pull the handle down, the ram moves up to meet the tool head, and that's where the different stations are on the shell plate, and that's where the brass will sit, and that's where they'll meet the different dies in the station. So let's go ahead and dive into what it's like setting up a Dillon 550 for loading. For this video, we're going to go ahead and load 223 on it. Here we go. When setting up your dies and your first caliber setup for the 550, something that's unique to Dillon is that you get a caliber conversion kit. And what comes in this caliber conversion kit is a shell plate. And these shell plates are numbered, and that tells you what caliber they'll work on, and that's specific to the opening that's on the different stations. Also, the caliber conversion kit is going to come with these locator pins. And as you see, this number 3 is the same as the number 3 that's on this shell plate, and that is going to work together. When you get a caliber changeover kit from Dillon, that is also going to come with a spare tool head, a powder change assembly, and it's going to come with this tool head stand. And the way the tool head stand works is that there is a hole in the center, and it just sits on the tool head stand. What this is advantageous for is when you have multiple calibers, you don't have to completely reset up the dies every time you want to load for that caliber. You can set up a tool head, leave it set up to where you just swap out the tool head every time you want to go to another caliber, along with the caliber conversion kit, which is the shell plate and the locator pins. So for the purposes of 223, we are going to be using a number 3 shell plate and number 3 locator pins. Now, let's get into showing you how to set this up. First thing, it's the easiest thing to do, is just to put in the locator pins. And before we put the shell plate that's on here, each station that's on here, you're going to see a little a spot where the holes are, and that's where the locator pin goes. Now, you might notice that there were 3 locator pins, but this is a 4-station press. So why aren't there 4 locator pins? Well, when you ask yourself, why is this? It's a good question. On the first station, you have basically a modified paper clip, and it holds tension on the piece of brass that goes into the first station. And that's why you only have 3 locator pins instead of 4. The next thing to do is that you have these pins right here at the top. Now, don't throw them away. You're going to need them later. The next thing we're going to do, this is the part that allows you to articulate the tool head, and your thumb or fingers allow you, basically you just push this through once it's connected. And you have to take this off to set up the tool head. Now, what we do next is we're going to raise the ram completely. As you can see right here on the ram, there is a set screw. And the purpose of that set screw is when we put that articulating screw in, that set screw right there is going to provide tension on this screw so it doesn't back out when you start rotating the shell plate. Another unique piece to the Dillon setup is that it has this ball bearing right here that has a spring underneath it, and that helps underneath that auto indexes and allows you to center on your different spots on the tool head. So you'll have an audible click when you move to the different stations, when you rotate the different stations. The tool head just simply lays down, and when it finds that little detent, the way I go about tightening the shell plate screw is I take the 1/4 inch wrench, and what I'm going to do is I screw it all the way down to where it won't turn, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to back it out just slightly, and I'm looking for just a little bit of play in the shell plate, but I also want it to articulate and turn fully around. Now, while the set screw that's in the ram is loose, you're going to need to keep this wrench in the screw so it doesn't tighten down on itself. And I can see that this is moving freely and I don't have excessive slop in my shell plate. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my 1/8 inch Allen wrench. I'm going to tighten down on the set screw in the ram. I'm going to go hand tight, just finger tight, and then I'm going to go just a little bit more, and that's all it needs. And then I check to make sure everything is good. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to deal with putting the tool head in. And like I said before, these locator pins go in the 2 holes that are in the top here. So we take our tool head, our quick change tool head, we slide it in, and we put our pins in, and that secures the tool head. Now we're going to go ahead and start setting up the dies in the different stations. The dies I'm going to be using today are kind of a mixture of aftermarket dies that I have been using for quite some time, and I use because I like the finished product that they give. This is from a company called Mighty Armory, and this is their 223 full-length sizing die. Now, what this particular die does is that it also acts as a small base sizing die. And when you're dealing with semi-automatic reloading, like you are for the AR platform, a small base die is more preferred in my opinion. And basically what that means is that with a small base sizing die, you will actually size the base of the case. And the reason why that's more advantageous is when you're dealing with semi-auto platforms, you need a little bit more tighter tolerances because there's a lot more moving parts. So when you have a lot more grime and crud that's in the weapon, and you might have dirt and you might have debris, again, because this, you're loading, this is loading for competition, not just at the range shooting on a bipod, tripod, on a shooting bench. So you want to make sure that these cases are going to load 100% of the time, and a small base die gives you a little bit more insurance in making sure that that case will fit inside your chamber. In station 1, where we actually input the case in the 550, we're going to go ahead and set up the sizing die. And the way you do that is you raise the ram all the way up, screw the die down until it makes contact with the shell plate right here, and then you're going to raise it up. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up the sizing die with a singular piece of brass. With bottleneck cases like rifle brass, you need to make sure that you lubricate the brass. When I'm doing one piece at a time, I typically just use the Imperial sizing wax, but you definitely can use whatever sizing lubricant you want to. I just find that this is pretty easy when you just take a little bit and you're just working a piece of brass at a time. And that way, I don't know, it's just easier for me. That's just how I like to do it. So it has a primer in it, and it sits above flush in our case gauge. So I know that when we test this, my standard will be the case gauge to make sure that my headspace is set properly. Now, the things that we're going to test for is, one, is the depriming pin set to where it will deprime the primer, and two, where we set up with the headspace in the sizing with the die. So, run it up. All right, I believe I heard the primer pop into the tray. Let's see if let's pop it down. Oh, and I saw a primer fall out. So the decapping pin is set up properly. Let me wipe this lube off. And you can just barely see that it's sitting right at flush or just below. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go just a little bit more because I want it to be on the low side of Sammy spec on the sizing. So I lubricated the piece of brass with some wax. I'm going to run it back up. I'm going to take this out. And whenever you want to check your headspace, just remember you need to wipe off any lube that might be on the case, because that little bit of lubricant that's on the case will distort your case gauge measurement. All right, now I can see that is on the low side of the case. So that's more of what I was wanting. So we're going to make sure this is good. So the way you want to set the die is, I just put more lubricant on the case because I'm about to run it back up. You run the ram up, and the case is in the die. And this is when you want to set the lock ring. And the reason why you want to set the lock ring with a piece of brass inside the die is because it centers the die. The threads on reloading dies are pretty coarse, and so they're not super precise, which is good and bad. The good is that it allows you to float the die, but it also means that you need to set it up properly so the die is set up when you have it under tension. And the tension being with the piece of brass up in it, and it is basically self-center, or it's centering the die, and you set the lock ring then. All right, I used my Allen wrench to set the lock ring, and our first station is set up. The next station is going to be the powder measure. And this is a case actuated powder measure. So what that means is when the case goes up into the die, it actuates the powder measure to drop the powder. So the way we start this out is we insert the Dillon failsafe rod into the two tabs right here. And an easy way to do that is just to pinch them, raise the ram just slightly, and you're going to see this white plunger, and it's going to go underneath the ram. And the way Dillon says to set this up properly is that when the spring right here is compressed, that you could only get a business card through. So you can tighten to where you would need just a business card once it's compressed at the bottom cycle. When setting up the powder die, you need to pay attention to the powder bar as it pertains in this section between these two bars right here. What you want to happen is that when you have it at rest, where the handle is forward, that it's all the way, this portion is all the way out and it's all the way forward. When you raise the ram and a case goes up into the die, you want to pay attention to the powder bar as well, and you want this portion right here to go all the way to the right. And if it's not all the way to the right, like you see right here where it's in the middle, that means that you need to loosen the two screws right here at the, well, that's actually attached to the powder drop itself. And then you need to loosen the lock ring on the powder die. And you need to screw the die down until you see the square, and it's actually a white plastic square, and it'll go all the way to the right. Easiest way to do that is have a piece of brass down in there, and you just screw down while looking. It's a little difficult while trying to show you on camera, but let's see. I'm gonna raise it, lower it rather. Loosen this lock ring. And I'm going to screw the die down slightly. All right. And now you can see that it's close to being all the way to the right, but I'm going to screw it down just a little bit more. There we go. Now it is all the way to the right, and we know that we're getting full adjustment of that powder bar. Now, you can see that the powder measure is kind of loose and it moves all around. What you want to do right here is you want to find where everything wants to move on its own in its own natural way, and then you want to tighten everything down with the piece of brass in the powder die. Again, that's when you want to tighten the lock ring due to self-centering the die. And you just take the wrench, just a slight snug. Take our Allen wrench, And now we have tightened down the powder die to where we're getting full articulation in the die, and it's set up. For the next station, we're going to be setting up the bullet seating station. And again, we're going to use our Wheel of Fortune here, and we're going to rotate the case. Now, what's important to know is that it's what I found to help make your adjustments the most accurate is I find that keeping a piece of brass in the first station helps you set everything up more repeatable and a little more accurate. I'm going to show you the Lyman Pro Series seating. This is their 223 seating die. In case you ever had to wonder, boom, there it is. And this is a micrometer seating die. The reason why I pretty much only use micrometer dies for as much as I can is because I load more than one style of bullet, and I'm always trying to come up with a different load, mainly because once you find a good load with a powder and a bullet combination, the supply chain basically throws a curveball to you, and you can no longer either usually you can find the projectiles, that you can't find that powder anymore. So what I do is, how you set this up is you're going to run the piece of brass all the way up. We're going to run this die down, and I screw the die down till it made contact with the piece of brass on the shell plate, and then I backed it out about one full turn. Now, the other thing that I did is I put the micrometer stem at the very top. So there's a good chance that when I place the projectile on the brass, on the piece of brass like that, I just want to barely see that it gets it started. And as you see, it got it started, but we're trying to get to the cantilever right there, and obviously we have a ways to go, which is a good thing. I didn't want to go too far on the first rotation. Now, we see 2.289, and I know with this Hornady Full Metal Jacket, I'm looking for 2.20. So that means that I need to come down from 2.289 to 2.20. We're going to come down 60 thousandths first, and we're going to see how that works. So I'm going to rotate. All right. So I screwed it down, and let's see where we're at. 2.20. Perfect. So now that we have this set up, once again, we want to run the die up. And this is now when we want to set the lock ring. And you don't need to tighten it down super hard, just basically hand tight with just a little snug. Now we have the seating station set up. I'm going to rotate to our last station, making sure that we keep a piece of brass in station 1. And for the final step, what we're going to be doing is working with crimp. And the crimp die that I use is a Lee factory crimp die. The reason why I like it is that it's easy to use and it's easy to set up. Pretty simple. You can see that it's a collet style crimp setup, and basically you see those gaps in between each of the slots in the collet, and what you don't want to do is completely close them. You want to get it pretty close to being closed, and what you do is you measure as you go to see how far you want to set it up. I typically have it set up for 2 to 3 thousandths crimp, because that's really all you need for loading in an AR. So how we're going to set this up is you raise the ram. We're going to screw this down until we feel tension. We're just going to screw this down. And once I start to feel resistance, I'm going to lower the ram and I'm going to screw this down about a turn or so. And what you do is you look down from the top and you check to make sure the spaces in between the collet aren't being completely closed. We're going to take an initial measurement of the case neck, and it's going to show 2.246, 2.247. Now we're going to take the completed round and we're going to run it up into the crimp die and see if we made any change. .244. So we went down 2 thousandths, so that is good to me. And that is as simple as it gets to set up the crimp die. Not super complicated. It might be one of the easiest ones to set up. That's a wrap. That is how I load 223 on the 550, and that's individual steps. If you want to watch me load up an actual batch and run through it, I can do that too. Just let me know. Shoot me a message or leave it in the comments. But next, what we're going to go over is the 1100 and the differences. There's some similarities, and then there's going to be some differences. And so we'll go over that loader next. I'm having people ask me about how I do my case prep for competition, and I'll make that my next series, and I'll go through all my steps and what I use. I'll explain how I did it in the beginning, and I'll show you what I do now. You don't need everything, and that's why I want to show you different tiers, because I don't want you to feel like you have to go in debt to get into reloading, because you really don't. Now, you're always going to want something else, but you don't have to, right? That pretty much does it for this one. So we will see you next time talking about the 1100. So until then, we'll see you at the range.